If we can learn to manufacture bravery and actually stand up and go to the elevator, that micro moment of that sliding door and stepping across the starting line into that elevator changed my life. When that moment, small micro window of opportunity meets a manufactured moment of bravery, it's not a feeling, it's a strategy.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor Podcast, presented by Forbes Books, the show where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is my good friend, Amy Jo Martin, a New York Times bestselling author, founder, investor, and CEO of Renegade Global. She began her career with the Phoenix Suns, where an unexpected interaction with Shaq, that we'll talk about today, sparked her first company. Since then, Amy Jo has helped brands like Nike, Google, and Hilton humanize their message and transform how they connect with people. And today, she's here to help you do the same. Now, make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. Amy Jo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Don. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we've known each other for years. I had the chance most recently to see you speak to an incredible group of entrepreneurs at Gathering of Titans up at MIT. And I love when I study the message you deliver to these companies. You right off the bat, you say humans connect with humans, not logos. So we must humanize to monetize. I love that, and I just would love when you're thinking about how to break that down. Somebody's listening to you. How do we humanize to monetize?
Such a good question, Don. And it's ever evolving, but I feel like we're right back, we're at this huge next wave of technology. It's not just a wave, it's a tsunami. So how do we play with that dynamic? And when I think of humanize to monetize, really, humans connect with humans, not logos. And that connection converts and it compounds over time. And as I look at where we are right now with AI, we've got this nexus of artificial intelligence and human intelligence. And it's like exactly where I like to play and translate and simplify. And what's beautiful is AI is designed to compete with a lot of the things that don't really make us human or bring out the human
Mm.
side of us. And it's like, great, take it all day because we want to be playing at our capacity, our zone of genius, what we're uniquely qualified to do. And that's oftentimes a premium.
So I'd love to ask you because there have the news over the last few months has been, companies tinkering with the logos and sending people off into the stratosphere with that. Um, in a world in which what really, to your description there is so powerful, we value that relationship with each other. Why do so many people get caught up in logos?
Well, what's kind of brilliant, I think, is we usually fall in love with something behind that logo, right? So whether it's Nike or it's your barista at Starbucks or it's,
Mm,
I can think of most of the brands that I love. There's something human about them, whether it's one individual or it's many. There's someone in my life that's humanized it for me. And that doesn't mean it's the founder and CEO necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the athletes that are endorsing. There is a feeling. So if we can create an emotional connection that bridges the heartbeats of the brand, the heartbeats of the logo, which are the people, not just professionals, like the real humans. And that logo and that connection to the customer, client, stakeholder, that becomes extremely powerful because that's when we really can start scaling.
how does a global company remain human?
Great
And you've worked
question.
with some of the great global companies of all time. How do you coach them?
Well, and here's an example. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Buc-ee's and
Yes.
the
Oh, who
okay.
is my kids? My kids will drive 50 miles out of the way to go to a dang Bucky's, which is dumb, but I get it.
Okay, or Zappos, right? Like
Right.
Tony Hsieh, the CEO of Zappos, unfortunately no longer with us. he didn't even really care about shoes. He was delivering something that transcended. It's the culture. It's just contagious, and you walk in there and you can't stop smiling. And so people it's a feeling, right? So, we could look at individuals like Shaquille, we could look at logos like Zappos or, you know, even companies that maybe mean something to you, but they may not mean something to me. It's the people almost always. And yes, the quality, you could look at Apple and Steve Jobs, he said, "May the best storyteller win." Well, why did he say that? Because persuasion comes from people and story, not just data, right? We're more likely to change our behavior and what we're doing, which is very difficult to get people to do, through the power of story. Who delivers story? Humans. AI is not
Mm.
going to start delivering stories in the same way. They might help craft it. They might help, make them more valuable in different ways or reducing cycle time and coming up with concepts, but who's going to deliver that emotional connection?
Mm. Us. You're a great storyteller, which I think is probably, it's the hallmark of what's allowed you to become so successful even in everything else you've touched. But your brand is built on, 3 words, that are 3 of my favorite words because I've learned them through you. Why not now, right? It's the title of your podcast, and you've asked hundreds of guests to share their own "why not now" moment. Can you take us back to yours?
Time, a healthy tension and a healthier relationship with time over the years. So we vote with our time for the life that we live. Period. Full stop. Whether that's the life we want or the life we don't want, we're constantly voting. And so we can change our vote at any moment. And I think that's been one of my hardest lessons.
Mm.
So the first one would come back to, I've told this story before, but it is one of the most powerful days in my life, and that would be, standing in the JFK
Mm.
airport, looking at the departure board. And there came a moment where I walked over to Starbucks that morning. Couldn't really remember where I was. Had figured that out, and as I went to sign the receipt, Dawn, I was blank. I didn't know my name,
Wow.
and I just kind of scribble something and just blank. Emotional and physically bankrupt, millionaire, and I was really young. I thought that's everything I wanted was, all these carrots, a recognition, check, numbers in the bank account, check,
Mm.
all the financials and growth trajectory, check. And it was a tough day because I was out of gas and I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. It was robotic. It was really robotic. And it's ironic because here we are with AI. I really believe a lot of this technology and these robots, if you will, which, yes, they are here and they're going to continue to be popping up more and more in people's lives. That's actually going to help us with getting us back in our zone of what we're uniquely qualified to do as humans.
Mm.
And I was just tapped at the 24 hours in a day. So that was a reckoning moment. And that's when I started reaching out to friends and mentors and people of all walks of life and asking, tell me about a time when you were in a similar spot and you asked yourself, why not now? And you made a big shift, like a tectonic plate shift. And I want to dissect that with you, that delta between idea and action. And let's surgically go look back at those steps. And it might have been a season. It probably wasn't some epic day that the, lights came on, although sometimes those happen too. Usually it's brewing. And then I just learned and listened more. And that was a big turning point for me.
One of the things you talk about often is you contrast bandwidth and capacity, right? Bandwidth is finite, 24 hours in a day, but capacity is infinite. What's the biggest misunderstanding that you think leaders have about those 2 ideas?
Well, it's leaders at every level, I would say. tend to overestimate our bandwidth and underestimate our capacity. So we do. I look at it as, imagine 24 hours in a day, they're finite, and we've got them as a line here. This is our bandwidth. But our capacity, if you can imagine an arrow going up from that, that is infinite, and we can always fly higher. So there's more potential there. It is not bound. Well, what happens is when we get tapped at bandwidth, right? The signs of bandwidth of being over band or tapped out at bandwidth would be constantly running late to meetings, can't stop and think, treating level 2 issues with a level 10 energy. Just we've all been there, and you're over programmed. It's absolutely, you think waking up earlier and earlier is a strategy. And so those are signals. And then capacity, this is where your earning potential resides, your impact, your ability to, really your health, your ability to make an influence. And it's what you're uniquely qualified to do, right? And that's what gives you energy. It doesn't mean it's easy, but we can feel stretched. What happens when we're tapped here, we trap ourselves here. It's like a box. We kind of box ourselves in. There's no way we can exercise that lift. And you have to get lighter to get higher. It's kind of like an airplane. I'm getting my pilot's license right now, and I love how
Are you really? Look at
yes, I
you.
am. I've got my little pilot's flight log right here.
Oh, look at you.
Just started. But there's so many aspects about life that are similar to when you look at altitude, you look at sailing or flying, and it's like airplanes really do operate more efficiently at altitude.
Right.
They require less fuel because
Thinner
they were
air.
designed to be up
Right.
there.
Right.
We were designed to be up here. We weren't designed to be trying to fit too many things in a day. So that is where, what do you do? What do you do when you want to reconcile that? Delete, delegate, divest in anything possible, and
Delete, delegate, divest.
divest in anything possible, and start circling and striking on your to-do list like your quality of life depends on it, because it does. And that means on the P&L, that means the personal to-do list, that means everything. And I call it the ruthless red pen. And we literally have on the team and within Renegades, it's like time to get that ruthless red pen out, and you're never done. You 80-20 the 20, you 80-20 the 20. And then all of a sudden you just feel like a different human when you have a little time to think. You realize the ROI of what that not only feels like, but the ROI of the literal output. And it just starts to shift your frame. Yeah.
You 80-20 the 20. And
And
and and it's a never-ending process.
yes, and you know where I learned that?
Mhm.
This story, Don, but when my son, of everything in my life has happened on an airplane. That's partially why I'm getting it's like at an airport or an airplane. I almost had my son on an airplane,
In Denver,
and
right?
I landed for a layover. I was going to Coachella, as you do when you're 6 months pregnant, but in Denver,
Everyone. Yeah.
land the plane, and he arrives within 1 hour. I'm by myself. I have a 2-pound micro preemie. It's a 90-day layover, right? And as soon as he became healthy enough where we're like, he's good, he's going to make it, you start to think differently. Like, you're already crystal clear day one. Nothing else matters. Got it. Priority. Overnight, my output in terms of working time decreased by about 80%.
Mhm.
And I'm just next to his incubator. And what happened was we'd 80-20 the 20, 80-20 the 20, and we doubled the company in size that year. I mean,
Mm.
I get to speak as you do, and talk to all these different companies and industries, and AI is the biggest accelerant of our ability to get back into capacity. Like, it is just, it's a gift. And so I'm excited for it.
And by the way, just because I want the audience to know, that 6-year-old is a rambunctious, energy, but ball of energy, and right? And is,
Yeah.
but and is healthy and growing today. I love it. Good.
You
I
would
just
never know, right? You would never know
never
he was on oxygen for the first year of his life.
unbelievable.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
So our listeners are largely, business leaders. Many of them kind of early stage, hoping to learn from business leaders like you, things that they can apply into their lives. If we're trying to figure out how to 80/20 the 20, um, is there an advice? Is there some piece of advice you would give us? Some way that some strategy to, I mean, to kind of attack that concept more tactically?
Absolutely, and that's where, you know, I'm just a huge advocate of AI, but, our priorities are what we do, not what we say. So let's
Mhm.
just look at Microsoft Copilot, which is built upon OpenAI's ChatGPT, but Microsoft has the suite of all of the different products of your calendar, obviously your email, Teams, correspondence all day. You've got PowerPoint, you've got Excel and CRM. And if you were to go and as a leader of a team, small, large, or an individual contributor yourself, and you're using Copilot, let's say, you can look at your quarterly goals and priorities or your weekly goals and priorities as a team, as an individual, and ask Copilot and say, look at everything I just did this week. Does
Mm.
it align with what I said are my priorities? It knows your communication. It knows where you're spending time, what meetings you're in, what you're discussing. And so I don't look at this as like the eye in the sky, big brother type thing. I look at it as an accountability tool that will keep you self aware, a thought partner that will help stretch you in your capacity. Show me your calendar and we can reconcile it like a budget at the end of the month. That I know percentage wise how much time I have with Lincoln and it's set. It isn't just a default. It doesn't just end up whatever's left over, right? I am just super intentional about deep work, about my time with Lincoln, comms, how much time I will and won't. And it took years and hard decisions to delete, delegate, divest. But I'm just a happier version, a more productive version when I am in control. Because perceived control and perceived progress are two ingredients of happiness scientifically. And so if we can even feel that we have control
Right,
over
we
our
have to
calendar.
believe it, right, whether it's
Yeah,
completely true or not, the fact. Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
And I hear in the corporate world often where a leader will have maybe a pet passion project, which it happens all the time. I know I have them too. Or, here's something that we can do, team. It's a friend of Amy Jo's. Okay,
Mhm,
that's nice. And then there's the big clients that we, right? But if we aren't being real with ourselves about, if we're trying to reduce cycle time and we're trying to hit all these goals and we're still running circles around this passion project, that's cute, but that might be a hobby, and we might need to shelve it or find a different route, and it's a no,
mm.
it's a I have another commitment, I'm practicing calendar integrity.
Calendar integrity. Wow, I don't think I've heard that phrase. That's awesome.
Calendar integrity. Okay, this is what I think of when I think of calendar integrity. Looking at every standing meeting on your calendar, let's just say quarterly if we're in the corporate world, because this might be
Right.
more doable. And making pressure testing that time. Does it really need to be there? Right? Could this be a 3-minute voice note? Could this be a, a very quick 5-minute check-in that's a call, not a Zoom during a walking meeting? Is this just there because it's always been there and we're not quite sure why? Are there more bots showing up than humans? Like it's
Mm,
just Microsoft data is showing that meetings are up 250% since COVID,
since
but
COVID.
they have not come down.
Mm.
Like, Don, the math doesn't work, right? Do you feel that?
Where's the
Yeah.
time to be creative? Exactly, right?
And just literally get things done.
Right.
250% in 2019, if we had 250% less
Mm,
meetings, um, it's kind of like we're smarter than that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, but no, but to your point, I love your line, "There are more bots showing up than humans." I was on a mastermind group not recently of a bunch of professional speakers, and literally there were more bots than because people couldn't make it, so they sent their bot to kind of take notes, and you're sitting there looking at going, gosh, this is a mastermind. I can't mastermind with a bot, right? There is zero contributor into this conversation,
That's
and
such
so
a
yeah, you looked
great
at it and you
point.
thought, wow, maybe I'm in the wrong group. If everybody's that busy, maybe we're in the wrong group.
We don't have any rules around any of this yet. We'll write the rules. Renegades write, you get to write the rules for yourself, for your company, for your industry. You can start really making an impression on those standards, that it's every situation's different,
Mm.
and there are benefits. But I started thinking, like, when you RSVP for a meeting, do you need to RSVP for your bot too? Do you need to RSVP if it's
RSV
for you?
plus one. Is it my plus one?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Do you need to what kind of bot is it? Is it an agent, or is it,
Right.
it's what value are you offering and what value are you receiving?
Research shows that 80% of us believe we have a book within us, but the number of people who follow through and do the work to create that book is far, far less. The reason is that the process can seem so overwhelming. And that is why I have partnered with Forbes Books to make the process easier for those of you who listen to this podcast and believe you have a story in you. So if you're ready to turn your leadership experience into your legacy, start your journey with us today at Forbes Books. Visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started.
Yeah.
Great. You're right. There'll be some rules that need to be written one of these days soon. Your journey, I love it, and I loved learning it years ago from you. Small town girl, born in Wyoming. You grow up living in some trailer parks, family moving around, and now you've gone from there to building a global brand. In that journey, especially in the early stages and that window of time in which so much is formative, is there a lesson there, an early lesson that still anchors you today?
So many, so many. Absolutely. And I think one of which was just things changed a lot. My environment changed a lot. My world changed often because we moved our trailer. My father worked in heavy highway construction, and the
Mhm.
projects it was very convenient to be on
Gotta go where
wheels.
the
And
projects are, right.
yep, I think you just become so used to it and comfortable that it's served me very well in technology.
Mhm.
It's just, I'm constantly like, I'm not attached, right? Like, let's keep pushing. If we're not changing, it's not going to end well. And looking forward to that opportunity, the resourcefulness in it. I
Mm,
often find pride and create, like, just a challenge in resourcefulness versus resources.
mm,
Like, what do
mm,
you think we could do with almost a MacGyver type of mindset? And hat tip Tony Shea for that one. I had never met someone so resourceful, who was what, quite possibly up there close to being a billionaire. And watching the way someone's mind works, my father is wired that way too.
mm.
You just, like, it becomes a game. Like,
Yeah.
how could we? What if? So those are a few things. And then you're just
Mhm.
scrappy, you're just, what's out there? Let's go explore. Um,
Speaking of your dad, I read a fun piece about your first experience skiing. It made me laugh a little bit, right? Your dad said, "We're skipping the bunny slope. You're going straight to the top." Um, a pretty risky move, pretty dangerous dad move. But tell us the story and tell us what maybe something you learned from that.
That's a biggie. So, I'm going to track back and do a full circle here, because the JFK airport,
Mm,
that realization, small town girl coming from, the trailer parks of Wyoming, then realizing, okay, I've got this huge shift. Well, I don't even like carrots, but clearly I was chasing all these carrots. I end up sitting down with Simon Sinek, and he asked me, what was your earliest childhood memory? And I was like, really, Simon, I need help here. Like, we're not going down the therapy route. Like, now help. And
Simon the therapist.
he's like, I'm the white guy. He knows what he's doing, clearly. My game. And I recorded the whole conversation, but I said, it's being at the top of a Black Diamond Mountain with my father. It was Red Lodge in Montana. And he's like, what do you mean? How old were you? And I hadn't had kids yet. So I just show him based on, I was like, no, old enough not to have poles yet, or not old enough. And I was about this high. And he said, you're at the top? I said, yeah, my dad's a really good skier. And we just leapfrogged the bunny slope. And he's like, what? I said, yeah, he doesn't really believe in the bunny slope. And he said, well, were you scared? I said, no, I was with my dad. And he said, make a fries if you want to speed up, make a pie if you want to slow down, right, with your skis. And if you get scared and you get in trouble, I'll pick you up, because I was basically right between his skis. And I said, no, I was with my dad. And he's like, interesting. And your dad's an expert skier. Yeah. And he said, has it ever occurred to you, Amy Jo, that you help guide everyone else down these Black Diamond Mountains of life, but you don't let anyone help you? And that was true. I was
Mhm.
crashing and burning. I was pushing from a place of trying to like prove something, and a chip on my shoulder, probably small town, trailer park girl. I'll figure it out. And he was right. And I was like, nailed it, Simon, nailed it. I'm going to go get a tattoo of a black diamond. I found my why. And he's like, oh, no, you're not. He's simmer down, and you're going to try this on, and I'll approve the tattoo in a couple years if it's still legit. Anyway,
Ah,
long story short, I realized I needed guides, because I was crashing and burning. Just, we can't be experts in everything. And so if you want to play at that level and you want to be high octane, you better have others around you that know what they're doing in areas that you don't, right? And full circle,
I
I
was gonna
did get my
say,
black diamond.
listeners, she has the black diamond. It's actually right there on her wrist. Yep,
Yeah, the
it's
company logo,
company
the third
logo.
company is, you know,
Right.
and I just really credit him to helping me become more self-aware.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. When you're talking to struggling leaders, to people who are just feel maybe like you at that JFK, in that JFK airport, there's got to be a first step. What would be that first step for someone who just is in a state of overwhelm right now?
Well, I would say that's the majority of who I'm seeing. I've never
I,
seen
I bet.
the amount of and the level of exhaustion in people's eyes than I do now when I travel the world and get to talk to people. And I would say really looking at, is this a situational struggle that's specific to the quarter and some things that have shifted with the business, and it's a temporary moment? Or is this I really haven't been feeling at capacity or joy or fulfillment for quite some time, and I don't know how to get back there? And sometimes it's a combination, but for a lot of people, there's just been this fatigue of burnout and boredom at the same time for so long, they don't know which way's up. And oftentimes, I think we assign that to our profession or our career. It's so much of the time that we spend, during our waking hours, that we almost just assume that that's what's causing it. It's got to be my job or what I'm doing. And usually that's not the case. It's an inside job, right? And so if we kind of focus before going to making some huge shift that's going to change the tectonic plates, the why not now is like, why not get real with myself of what's really going on here? Not like, why not now pivot tomorrow and leave corporate, or try to, jump from one side of the or one ladder to the other, or why not change industries? It's like, hold up, let's just like keep anything stable that can stay stable so we can go adjust what's going on. Because usually it's because we're not feeling capacity. Like, I know for me, there have been moments where I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just not, stimulated, feeling a little disenchanted. I'm not learning. That's usually what's
Mhm.
happening. I'm not learning, and I'm not doing what I'm uniquely qualified to do. So Dr. Gay Hendricks, brilliant. He talks about, your zone of excellence versus your zone of genius. And excellence is very, in a lot of, ways we look at excellence as, oh, that's what they're really good at. They should stay doing that. The outside world, our stakeholders that are closest to us want us to do that because they know we're good and it's worked, and like, keep encouraging. Why would you change? But usually it's just a little bit away from that bullseye of your zone of genius, right?
Genius.
And
Right.
so I know it's easy to get stuck in that excellence, and that excellence becomes dull. And so I guess I would just really take stock of, when's the last time you felt alive? When was the last time you were excited?
What a great question to ask yourself. When's the last time you felt alive?
How much
Wow.
sleep are you really getting? How much screen time are you really consuming?
Yeah.
When was the last time you were outside? And then, because you have to make time to think. You need space to figure this out, you
Mm.
know? And then, yeah, it might be an epic, okay, set the goal, set the fun, crazy, I'm gonna go learn to captain a boat or write a book or change industries or go after that job that I don't feel qualified to do, but it's AI and who is qualified. Like, I see that happening left and right, and it's so exciting,
Yeah.
especially in the corporate world. Like, anybody can be an expert in what they do using AI.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
land grab.
It is, and right now is the time to go establish yourself in that space because, as you said, anybody who's pretending to be an expert in it is probably pretending. You said that you've always had a chip on your shoulder, and it really started growing once you entered the world of professional sports, working with the Phoenix Suns, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of that. But I've argued that I think every great that I've ever worked with has a chip on their shoulder because it sometimes you have to have it to fuel you when because otherwise you're just so good at what you do that the chip is in fact it brings it home for you that what you're doing is still meaningful. Um, how what was the chip for you and how did you turn it into fuel?
Interesting question. I would agree with you, by the way, that the talent, whether it's business or athletics or any kind of people at the top of their game, you're gonna find an edge somewhere there, right? Like, good
Mhm.
good luck not finding that edge. Um, but I think we learned to finesse it more. I was having a conversation with a very good friend, and we've grown up. She started in sports around the same time. She's now a COO of a huge company, private equity backed. Like, she's got a big job, and we were just talking about how we used to force. Like, I knew I could make something happen, so I would make it happen, and it took a lot of sheer force of will.
Mhm.
And at the time, I don't regret it because that's what needed to happen at the, maybe the level I was at, or just the, don't ask a lot of permission, ask forgiveness, bring your results with you. And you ruffle some feathers sometimes when you're doing that. And if you care too much about what everybody else thinks around you, you likely aren't going to innovate, because consensus is not usually friends with reinvention, innovation. We don't have time. If you wait for consensus, you're late, and nobody can afford to be second right now. So
Mhm.
so I look at the chip. It was a pushing from a place to prove something, and probably small town girl, trailer park, Wyoming, goes to ASU, now working in sports. You know, you better have some confidence in the rooms I was in, and I was oftentimes 30 years junior
Junior.
from everyone else around
Yeah.
my boardroom table, and the only female. And so that conversion eventually turned into trusting, and I could see my results, and that, like, oh, you can trust yourself. Yeah. Like, yeah, you don't have to push so hard. You need to finesse, not force. And you're naturally going to operate a certain way. Now it's like, let's polish some of those edges a little bit. And it's a superpower if you overcorrect. I think we all have this lightsaber, and mine's usually on or off, and there isn't a dull, right? And so it's it's on, and you need to know how to use it. It can be your demise just as quickly as it can be your biggest asset. And um, I've had some hard falls, some humbling moments, but I think that I'm really proud that I was brave enough to take certain chances, because most people don't know the thousands of chances that I've taken that didn't work, right? You read about and hear about the ones that worked, but it's it's a numbers game, and you have to be able to figure that out yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you.
I know you've told the story 100,000 times, but it doesn't matter. It's still one of my favorite stories because I happen to know both of you, so I can appreciate how the interaction between the two of you probably grew. Do you mind just
Oh,
sharing quickly,
I'd be happy to. And while I do it, I'm happy to share like maybe 3 storytelling tips, only because
please?
uh, this story, yes, I've shared it many, many times. However, it's evolved for me, and the lessons I'm learning still from this one story. You will hear the same thing happen, but what it converted to and the impact it made is still unlocking for me. So that's exciting.
Wow, that's pretty
It's
cool.
still alive. I'm like, oh. So it's mid 2000s. I'm sitting at my desk working for the Phoenix Suns in the NBA. We were rock and roll, seven
And your
seconds or
role there
less.
was
I was the director of new media and research. It was,
whatever that meant at
yeah, we
that
didn't
time.
know what to call it. So we're like, new, very creative. And I was the figure it out gal. Like, oh, digital signage, don't know. Amy Jo figured it out. Oh, email, mobile marketing, Amy Jo figured it out. Twitter. And I had been playing and experimenting with social media. So the phone rings, basketball operations is calling. Amy Jo, get down to the locker room right now. Shaquille wants to learn how to tweet. And nobody in this building knows what that means. So get down here. We heard you do know what that means. Click. And when you work in pro sports, there's one rule, and that is you do not interface with the athletes unless that's your job. Director of new media and research, not my
Not
JD,
your job.
right?
Right.
And I stand up and I remember just like calculating, when your mind just starts with like, if this, then that, if this, then that, and it's computing, you're like, safe enough to try, I'm going to ask forgiveness instead of permission on this one. And okay, time out. Small town girl from Wyoming, grew up in a trailer park. I'd never met a celebrity before. I'd
Mm.
never taught them anything. Just learned how to drive on the freeway, probably. And I hit the elevator button and those doors open. And this is the thing, Don, that I realized, like, if we can learn to manufacture bravery and actually stand up and go to the elevator, that micro moment of that sliding door and stepping across the starting line into that elevator changed my life. There's zero chance
Mm.
I'd be talking to you right now if I hadn't done that. And when that moment of like small micro window of opportunity meets a manufactured moment of bravery, because no one taught us how to be brave. And it's a strategy, not a hope or, you can't hope that you're brave. You
Mm.
can't, it's not a feeling, it's a strategy.
Right.
So the doors open and there he is. He's 7 foot tall, Shaquille O'Neal, you know, larger than life. He hands me his Shaq berry, which at the time it was mid 2000s. So it was his Blackberry.
BlackBerry, right?
And he said, well, what do I say? Meaning on Twitter, now X, social media in general. Instagram didn't exist yet. Facebook was around. YouTube was around. And I said, share the Shaquille behind the Shaq, share the person behind the personality. You don't brand yourself, you are yourself. And that creates a brand. So you don't brand yourself, you are you. That is your brand. People can see what you're doing on television. You're playing basketball. You're really good, all-star MVP. Struggle with your free throws a little bit, but you're good.
Yes, he
Yeah.
does.
You remember that era.
Uh, it
I
never
didn't
ended. His
I
Shaq
didn't
and
s
free
it
throws.
didn't.
Yeah,
Hack-a-Shaq all the way into the
yeah.
legacy and twilight of his career. But he made up for it, didn't he? Well, and what happened was he was game on, and it doesn't get better. You've got a larger than life, basically one of his number one goals in life, I think, is just to have fun. and be himself and zero ability to fake anything, and he embraced it. And the
When he
next
handed you his Shackberry with his Twitter account open, he had how many followers at the time?
several thousand,
Yeah.
maybe?
And it was just he just put his name out and said that he was opening an account. Back there, they didn't have the check mark, right? You
Right.
you weren't verified.
So
So
I called
people didn't really
Twitter.
know if that was really him.
Right. So, and that was one of the biggest issues that brings us right back to where we are today with AI. It reminds me so much because, we had to find a way to authenticate who he was because I was starting to think about how can we sell against this? We've got endorsement deals, we have partners. I had created a formula on how to measure the warm and cold metrics and the return on influence. And it was just like, we dollars were starting to be up for grabs. And so I called Twitter and I said, he has some imposters. How do we get rid of them? Because it's really confusing to not only fans and consumers, but the brands that are writing checks. And they said, oh, there were 11 people that worked at the Twitter office at the time. 11.
11.
This great. We've got this blue check mark we're going to put on his account. And I was like, really? A blue check mark? Like, what is that going to do? And they said, we're going to give him the first one. We'll give you the second one because he keeps talking to you on Twitter and bantering to authenticate this is the real scenario. Again, changed my life, changed his life in terms of he's now reaching people in Australia who could care less about basketball, but they are connecting with him, at a human level. And you must humanize to monetize, but they care and they're entertained and they are finding value. And now all of a sudden his presence, his footprint is present when he is not. His persuasion is able to convert and persuade when he is not even present. And so if we want to talk about scalability, there you go. If we want to talk about voting with your time, that's a way to be in more than one place at one time. And it was
Mm.
just like playing with this magic potion. And so we did some really cool stunts, and then that was the catalyst. He became my first client when I started my first company.
All right, you promised me 3 storytelling tips out of that experience.
Number one, present tense. I'm sitting at my desk. It's mid 2000s. I'm not telling you I was sitting at my desk, Dawn. No, I want you right here, right now. Number two, we're jump cutting. I'm at the elevator. I didn't need to talk about the walk and talking to my boss or whatever. Jump cutting to calling Twitter. And then third, I think those little moments of quick timeout. I'm a small town girl from Wyoming. Da, 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 da. Humility, relatability. We want to sprinkle that in and make sure that we're connecting and not just telling something from some ivory tower. So
Man, I love it. You had that great line. I wrote. Well, first off, I mean, I've written on every piece of paper I have laying around here with notes of things that you said because it was so many nuggets. But you talked about you have a lightsaber. It's either on or off. I am so grateful that you brought your lightsaber to our conversation this morning and that you kept it on. Bright, Amy, Joe, you are literally. I have been a fan for years. I'm so grateful that our relationship has continued to grow and to stay in touch. And I am grateful that today you are a corporate competitor with us.
likewise, I'm so excited to also have you join me on my podcast as well and hear from you so everybody can learn. There's so much value that you offer, and you're such an incredible host and voice of authority. So thank you for your friendship, but thank you for this connection as well and giving me a place and space to share.
Well, I think you can tell why Amy Jo is literally one of my favorite people, why I have learned so much from her over so many years, and how grateful I am that she brought that to today's conversation. I could have taken anywhere from 7 to 10 takeaways. That's what I wrote down on my notes, but I did boil it down to 3 plus a bonus that I'm going to share with you. The first was her discussion around bandwidth versus capacity, right? The idea that that bandwidth is finite, capacity is infinite, but it's only infinite if we will do the right things. She talked about getting her pilot's license, that whole idea that you have to be lighter to get higher. And if we're trying to increase our capacity, it is about exactly that, getting lighter to get higher. And she offered that advice, right? When you're looking at your to do list, when you're looking at your calendar, delete, divest, delegate. What can you do in those three spaces? And then she said, I love this line, circle and strike from your calendar things that aren't required. Do so like your life depends on it because it does. So meaningful. Wow. I mean, I'll never forget that line. And so how do you do that? I mean, I loved digging in with her, and she talked about the idea that you 80/20 the 20%. So you go ahead and you do your 80/20, then you take the 20%, you 80/20 that, and you 80/20 that. And that ability to continue to pare away the things that are not necessary, the things that are not driving you to live in your proper zone. Though that's and she proved it, right? She proved it. She talked about having Lincoln, her son, and there she was in the NICU for months, and in that window of time, 80% of her opportunities to be engaged in her business fell off the table because she needed to be present with her son. And in that same window, she doubled the size of her company, even with less bandwidth. How? Because she 80/20'd her 20. My second great takeaway was she talked about we vote with our time as we try to define the life we live, right? And we can change our vote at any time. So we vote with our time and we can change our vote at any time. And that was one example of how AI can help you that she used there, right? She talked about having AI analyze her calendar and weigh it against the priorities that she sets. Is she actually giving her time to the places that she believes are most necessary to her? Then my third great takeaway was that concept, a story about Shaq, the idea of manufacturing bravery and how important that is, right? You have to step through the elevator door, to use her example with Shaq. It all starts with that first step. And sometimes in life, we have to manufacture. We have to step out and do something that that in any rightful thinking situation we might go, no, that doesn't work. That's not what we should do today. No, you ask for forgiveness, and you bring the receipts with you on the way there. But as a bonus, I loved at the end her 3 tips on storytelling. Y'all know it's a huge part of my life, something I've studied for so long. The concept of great storytelling means so much to me. Her 3 great tips there on storytelling based on the story she gave you with her and Shaq, is were fantastic and are helpful for each and every one of us. I know I'll be using them even as I continue to grow my storytelling chops. I'm such a big fan of Amy Jo. I hope you are today as well. I I hope that this was as good a conversation for you as it was for me. I appreciate you.